Sharing your personal space with a roommate can be a polarizing experience. There's a 50-50 chance you might end up as best friends, or go through one of the experiences we're going to be telling you about today. Here are 3 disturbing roommate horror stories. As always, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell icon to stay tuned for more horror stories like these. 2018 was a nightmare for me, and I'll tell you why. It was my freshman year of college, and I had left my hometown in Missouri to learn fashion design in good old LA. I know, classic fish out of water story. Anyway, I had to stay in the dorms like any other middle-class kid who couldn't afford rent in LA. I was really excited to start this new phase in my life and finally chase my dreams. What I wasn't such a big fan of, however, was the fact that I would have a roommate. I'd never been much of a people person, and having no siblings growing up, I was the queen of my kingdom. Regardless, it was February 4th, and I had just finished setting up my side of the room. That was when I met Sarah, my new roommate for the next 4 years. Right off the bat, she and I didn't click on a lot of things. She was messy and loud, and would always leave her hair in the shower drain. But the worst thing about her was her obsession with Victorian-themed dolls. She had a collection of them that she would display all over the dorm room. They were everywhere, on the couch, on the kitchen counter, and even in the bathroom. They all had these creepy, lifelike eyes that seemed to follow you around the room. But I went along with it, thinking everyone was allowed at least one vice. This went on for 8 months, and by then, I had seen more dolls than people. At this point, I couldn't stand being in that apartment with Sarah and her dolls anymore. Every time I walked in, it felt like those creepy things were watching me. They had different expressions on their faces, but all of them seemed to be judging me. I tried to talk to her about it, but she just laughed and said that I was being silly. She even started buying more dolls, saying that they were her friends. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags. One night, I woke up to the sound of constant giggling. I sat up in bed and saw that Sarah was sitting on the floor, surrounded by her dolls. She was talking to them in different voices and accents, like they were real people. I really tried to ignore it and just go back to sleep, but the giggling grew louder and more hysterical. I had had enough, and I was getting ready to give her a piece of my mind. I had earned that right after putting up with her for the last 8 months. I got up and walked over to her, and that's when I noticed something even more disturbing. One of the dolls had a lock of my hair wrapped around its neck and was wearing one of my shirts that Sarah probably cut up. I knew the hair was mine since none of her dolls had ashen blonde hair, and neither did she. Unbelievably, I had to ask Sarah why she had my hair, but she just laughed and said that the dolls wanted it. I was terrified, and I didn't know what to do. There was no way in hell I was staying there any longer. The next day, I moved out to live with a friend I made during my time in LA, and never looked back. The experience left me traumatized, though. To this day, I still have nightmares about the whole situation. I'll be happy if I never see another doll for the rest of my life. Growing up as the middle child in a family of 6 brothers and sisters in Texas, I had a pretty solid grip on the whole shared space thing. I mean, how hard could it possibly be? I used to think a roommate was just a brother I hadn't beat at video games yet. It was that simple to me, but things turned out differently than how I imagined. First off, let me just set the scene. I'm a computer science student in my sophomore year, graduating class of 2019. By my second year of living alone and managing the rent by myself, the bills started to rack up. So I thought to myself, why not get a roommate? 2 heads are better than 1, right? Meet Jack. Jack was always quiet, kept to himself, and never really seemed interested in getting to know me. I tried to strike up conversations with him, but he always just seemed to brush me off with a mumbled response. At first, I kept him around since having to pay half of the rent was immensely easy on my wallet, if you know what I mean. But soon enough, he started to grow on me. I mean, we weren't best friends, But we respected each other's space and looked out for each other. I guess he was just shy or introverted, so I figured the least I could do was just be nice to him. Everything seemed okay for about 5 months, but then things started getting strange. It started with the little things, like finding the kitchen in a mess when I got home from work. Dishes and utensils were scattered all over the counter, and food was splattered on the walls in his room. I would ask Jack about it, but he would just say he was in a hurry or something and shrug it off, and that he would clean it up later. Then I started noticing strange noises coming from his room when I was home. It sounded like someone moaning in pain or crying softly. I would knock on his door, but he never answered. I assumed he was just watching a sad movie or listening to music, so I tried to ignore it. One day I came home early from my part-time job and decided to surprise him by making dinner, since it felt like he was going through something for the past few weeks. As a gesture of goodwill. As I started cooking, I heard the groaning again. It was louder and more intense than before. My heart was racing as I walked towards his room. I knocked on the door, but there was no response. The whining grew louder and more frantic, and I started to panic. I pushed the door open and found Jack lying on his bed, encircled by a dark, shadowy figure. He was barely conscious. His skin was pale and clammy. It felt like a nightmare. I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. They were brief seconds, but it felt like I had been watching him just lay there, lifeless, for ages. The dark shadow that had been looming over him disappeared just as I entered the room. I called 911 and they rushed him to the hospital. I just stayed at the apartment trying to process everything that had just happened. It almost felt as if after Jack left the apartment, the shadow had left with him. The rooms felt brighter, and the apartment just felt livelier. I don't know, it was weird. If I had to explain it, it seemed to me like the shadow was attached to him. When Jack finally woke up, he was in a daze. He looked confused and disoriented, like he wasn't sure where he was. I tried to talk to him, to get him to open up about what was going on, but he just kept staring blankly ahead. After this whole situation, Jack's parents moved him back out to New Jersey, and I never saw him again. Sometimes I wonder how he's doing, but he wasn't on any social media platforms as I recall. I've been living in the same apartment ever since then, without a roommate, and things at least seem to be normal. Sometimes I wonder, though, what or who was that shadowy figure? I was a nursing major at Washington State University in my final year. I had been living with my roommate Chelsea since 2016. I'd never thought that I'd be the type to share a room with anyone. I've always been one of those people that always really enjoyed my solitude. But I guess to survive in this economy, you gotta do what you gotta do. At first, it really wasn't so bad. She seemed nice enough. We didn't have a ton in common, but we were both busy with schoolwork, so we didn't spend too much time together anyway. I was okay with this arrangement. But then things started to get strange. Of course, it started with little things that would annoy me beyond belief. She would stay up late watching TV with the volume turned way up, even though I had an early class the next day. She would leave her dirty dishes in the sink for days on end. She would even borrow my clothes without asking. I tried to talk to her about it, but she always had some sort of lame excuse. She was stressed about exams, or she forgot to wash the dishes, or she couldn't find her own clothes, or whatever. The list would go on, but I didn't want to cause any drama, so I just tried to let it go. If you can believe it, things started to get worse. A lot worse. I would wake up in the middle of the night to find her staring at me. When I asked her what she was doing, she would just say that she couldn't sleep. I started to feel like I was being watched all the time. Even with my eyes closed, it's like I could feel her gaze on me. I couldn't believe I was starting to get creeped out by my own roommate. One night, I woke up to find her standing over my bed. She was holding a pair of scissors, and she was just staring down at me, smiling. I was so scared I couldn't even move. I didn't know what she was going to do. I called out to her, and it felt like she had just woken up. After this, she just walked away like nothing had happened. Following an experience like that, I could not sleep a wink. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing over me with those scissors, whispering my name. To be honest, I started to feel like I was losing my mind. I wondered if something was possessing Chelsea after she would fall asleep, but denied the possibility. But then one night, I woke up to find her standing in the corner of my room, just staring at the wall. I tried to talk to her, but she didn't respond. She just kept staring. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I talked to our RA the next day. I didn't want to get my roommate in trouble since she technically never hurt me, but I knew she needed help, and frankly, so did I. The only course of action I could think of at the time was just to move out and just move on with my life. I emptied my side of the dorm immediately and moved in with a friend of mine named Amber soon after. In the days that followed, I never saw Chelsea again. The RA told me she was really upset with my moving out and just decided to leave the university. She just went home. Good riddance, in my opinion. If you thought these stories were scary, then make sure you watch this next video here if you really want to be scared.